Good evening. I am connecting chat. If you receive this text in the chat, please let me know. I'm assuming all's fine sound-wise. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do this again next Monday. We'll see. The blog post that I put out on Friday, I guess, in some ways it ties up the book study from the perspective of kind of the theological thoughts, musings that I was having. I could definitely write numerous books based on the intersection between Orthodox theology and Kingsnorth's book, which is a kind of a summation in a lot of ways of the best of cultural criticism over the past 100 years or so. So there's a lot to unpack, and it's definitely a lifetime of work. So I've got my work cut out for me, but that's good. For now, like I said, I'm not sure if I will go live again next Monday. If you're not on the mailing list, please sign up for the mailing list. There should be a link under the video with the link to sign up for the mailing list and to download the eBOOK, the abridged version of the book that I wrote on the elders, the contemporary saints of Greece. So I hope you've enjoyed reading through the book. For those of you who are local, if you haven't heard from me about the Paul Kingsnorth after party, that's going to happen, God willing, sometime before the end of the month. And without further ado, I don't know if anyone's here. I don't see any texts in the chat box. So hopefully this is going out all right. I should check. Maybe I'll check on my phone. Oh, I'll be back. Looks like it's live. Yes. Okay. Looks like it's live. Well, I don't see video coming through. It's odd. Well, I hear audio. Hopefully there's video as well. I'm going to get started. So the blog post this past week was entitled "The Lie Christians Believe About Technology?" ? And I'll read through it slowly. When I started my book study of Paul Kingsnorth's new book, I had not originally planned. Oh, and you can follow along. There should be a link to this blog post underneath the video if you want to follow along. I had not originally planned to offer theological reflections. The more I contemplated the topics Kingsnorth touches on, however, the more I realized that in many ways, the topics Kingsnorth discusses are some of the most existential issues confronting Orthodox Christians and really all humans made in the image and likeness of God. Tugging on this thread, I found myself considering many things I had not previously considered, and most recently, the influence of our economic system on our spiritual life. The reality, of course, is that a proper consideration of the spiritual implications of economics on Christian life is a very large endeavor, which would be best served by a long-form book. I am planning something along these lines, though less academic and more practical, but this is a longer-term project and one that I don't think is best served fully developing here and now. All to say, I have decided to return to Kingsnorth's text and to leave our consideration of economics for the time being. This decision was particularly inspired by a recent conversation with my good friend Joshua, which had been in turn inspired by my reading of the following passage from Kingsnorth's book. Here's a quote. I learned from that experience on the Holy Mountain, that is Mount Athos, that my belief in the profanity of technology is not widely shared. While there have been astute religious critics of the machine, Wendell Berry, Ivan Illich, Jacques Ellul, and Philip Sherrard have all made appearances in this book, it appears that many spiritual leaders and thinkers are as swept up in the machine's propaganda system as anyone else. They have bought into what we might call the myth of neutral technology, a subset of the myth of progress. I find it hard to understand how true faith can coexist with either, but I think, as ever, I am in the minority here. And that is from page 246. Kingsnorth's words in the quote above echo those of Philip Sherrard in one of his last messages to the world, a posthumously published article entitled The Desert Fathers and Ourselves. In this article, Sherrard laments the Orthodox Church's seemingly uncritical acceptance of a variety of technological innovations that potentially undermine the Church's witness and spiritual experience. Okay, good. Thank you, Charles, for confirming that. I don't know, it's not showing up on my phone. What would you say is the biggest lie the Christians are duped by? Well, the title was definitely clickbaity, so apologies for that. There are many lies that Christians are duped by. A big one, the one that I'm referring to, obviously, is the myth of the neutrality of technology, and that somehow we can coexist with technology without it having a profound impact on our spiritual life. It's definitely one of the most serious lies because of the profound influence it has, and it's a slippery slope, and one that most people don't really think about and are unaware of, even our church leaders. So, okay, back to the, thanks, Charles, for confirming that you can see me. So I presented a paper at the 2025 Pavia Society Conference reflecting on Sherrard's article, pointing out some of the theological problems with Sherrard's work, while simultaneously pointing out the ways, by far the majority of the article, in which his diagnosis is worthy of consideration. I think I linked to, no, one of the copy of the article, The Desert Fathers and Ourselves, that I was linking to seems to have disappeared. It's gone down with the Eighth Day Institute website. Hopefully it'll come back. There is one other version that someone posted to their Substack as a guest post. They took great artistic license in posting 30 years after Sherrard's repose, a guest post from him from the grave. But I'm glad at least it's available online, because otherwise it wouldn't be. But if you Google The Desert Fathers and Ourselves, you can find that article, which I think is well worth checking out. Stay tuned. I will be releasing the paper that I wrote sometime soon, along with the video, although I film myself, so sometimes when that happens, it turns out a little bit fuzzy. So I'm going to try to sharpen the video quality. But for now, suffice to say that I sympathize with Kingsnorth's and Sherrard's concerns. Here's another quote from Kingsnorth. The 19th century Russian Saint Ignatius Bryanchaninov saw it too, and he knew exactly what it was. He wrote about the same force in his essay on miracles and signs, and here's the quote from Saint Ignatius. Ahriman will offer to mankind the most exalted earthly organization of well-being and prosperity. He will offer honor, riches, luxury, enjoyment, physical comfort, and delight. Seekers of earthly things will accept Ahriman and will call him their master. Ahriman will reveal before mankind by means of cunning artifice, as in a theater, a show of astonishing miracles, unexplainable by contemporary science. He will instill fear by the storm and wonderment of his miracles, and will satisfy the worldly wise. He will satisfy the superstitious, and he will confound human learning. All men, led by the light of fallen nature, alienated from the guidance of God's light, will be enticed into submission to the seducer. And then back to Kingsnorth, who says, I cheated a bit there, I admit. I changed one of the words. The name that the saint used in that passage was not Ahriman, it was Antichrist. And that is from page 260. Kingsnorth's point, of course, is that we can find a confluence of prophetic insight outside of the bounds of the church. This is, it would seem, not dissimilar to the experience of the Russian mission to the native Alaskans, who found that the natives were already spiritually attuned and prepared for the fullness of the revelation of Christ that the missionaries were bringing them. I don't want to write dogmatically, but it would seem that the following may not be far from the truth. It makes sense that the seeds of Antichrist would be planted within the world in which the fullness of the revelation of Christ had been revealed, Christendom. This process, the logic would follow, began with the Great Schism, which marked the beginning of the end of the spiritual vitality of Christianity in the West. Having rejected the inner spiritual realities of Orthodox Christianity, the West has retained its ethical outlines, which form the basis for Antichrist, who may appear Christ-like in a certain way so as to deceive. There is, of course, a rich history of this idea, especially in the Slavophile literature. This is not to judge the spiritual life of any particular Western Christian, but simply to attempt to objectively consider how we ended up in the situation in which we find ourselves. And we go back to a quote from Kingsnorth, who is quoting Ian McGilchrist. We exist in the world, of course, Ian McGilchrist writes, but we no longer belong in this world or any world worthy of the name. We have unmade the world. This is entirely new in the history of humanity, and it is impossible to exaggerate its significance. That is from page 267. I will end by emphasizing this point. The world which we inhabit is one in which we can no longer really be considered natives. The world that we live in has been so denatured, and our life in the world has become so detached from nature that we find ourselves in a situation that is, quote, entirely new in the history of humanity and is impossible to exaggerate its significance, end quote. Remarkably, the person who said this, Ian McGilchrist, is not himself a Christian. I'm increasingly convinced that it is the Orthodox Christian's responsibility to attempt to come to terms with this reality and to pray for and incarnate a spiritual path forward. Christians have always, and now more than ever, been called to be in the world, but not of the world. John 17:16. While difficult, in some ways, this may be a special blessing for us. Compromise with the world will become increasingly difficult. And in order to preserve our faith, conscientious Christians will increasingly be called to make difficult countercultural choices. May God give us the strength to remain faithful to him. So that is, that's it for this week's Protecting Veil post. I will go live again on Thursday. We'll finish off the book, God willing, with the chapter by chapter study. And then we'll see what happens after that. I made it, obviously, through Christmas and New Year. That was kind of a goal. And as one does, kind of put things off until the new year, and then you've got all sorts of things, taxes and all sorts of things waiting for you in the new year. And I had this book study, which I've enjoyed. I love the book, obviously, and I very much want people to read it. So I'm definitely glad for those of you who have stuck by me and stuck by the book and completed the course. And we'll see what comes next. There's a lot to go deeper into, so I'm excited for that. Charles writes, what does a return to our old way of being look like in this current place we find ourselves in history? Do we separate ourselves like the Amish or create a parallel society? Yeah, I think it somewhere in between those, probably, Charles. That's my intuition. Everyone has their own personal experience, obviously. As a single person living in the world with certain responsibilities that traditionally there'd be a community to help one bear those responsibilities, and I don't have that. So I have a kind of an existential crisis of sorts, a very kind of experiential sense of the loss of community and the loss of the safety net. So I try to not dogmatize my experience, because obviously not everyone has the same experience. That said, I do ask people to learn from them what their experience is, and if I'm just, being overly pessimistic or apocalyptic or dramatic, I guess. But I do not see, at least for myself, and especially after reading Kingsnorth's book, I don't see a way to continue to live according to the modern world in a way that is going to improve things. And by improve, I mean go back to something that is more human, that is life-giving for the individual as well as for the community. I think we have destroyed, we have allowed the machine to destroy so much of what it means to be a human, and we are allowing that to affect our children. We are living in kind of a toxic wasteland of media and a variety of metaphorical and literal toxins. And I don't see a way, apart from building something more beautiful with other people that feel similarly. And certainly, never closing oneself off. I think that's a problem with the Amish. I can see the temptation, and the monastics, as always, provide a really good example for this. They're very strict with themselves and with each other, and they put up walls, and they have, but they're also open to the world, especially modern monasticism, more so than in ages past, have opened the monastery up to the world because of the situation that the world finds itself in. So I think moving close to a monastery is a really good path forward. That way you have like the wisdom and the balance that comes from the monastics. There is a danger in individuals in small groups going out in the middle of nowhere and not having the wisdom, because it definitely requires wisdom, the process, and it can't be a quick thing. It can't be an absolute thing. It can't be a coercive thing. Nothing coercive bears fruit spiritually. So it can't be coercive against ourselves or against our families or loved ones or against other people. But I do think we need to make different choices. And at the end of the day, everyone has to make the choice that they have to make. But for me, it's kind of like one of those things where you can't unsee what you've seen. And that's seems to be clear, that is the path forward. So those are my thoughts. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining again, and we will be in touch. If you haven't already signed up for my newsletter, please do that. I would love to stay in touch with you. I have interesting things planned for the future, and would love to have you continue along the journey. Yeah, take care, and many blessings in the new year. Have a good week.